Just as a reminder, this is our last class meeting before spring break. So after today, you don't come back on Monday, not till March 18th. Okay, I've had students show up and be like, "Where is everyone?" All right. So Monday we started chapter 5, talking about the Axial Age. Remember, this is a period of time between 1000 BCE and the year 0, where we see the rise of new ideas, new philosophies. In some cases, old empires fall, new empires rise, and so on. So there's like a lot of change happening. We looked at China, and so I just wrote some of the things here. Some of the philosophies that we see arising, the rise of Confucianism, Taoism, and then legalism. These are all ways of not only looking at the world and looking at humanity, but we also see it as influential in the type of governments that the Chinese have during this time. In addition, some of the other things away from the philosophical, we see some changes in both military and other stuff. I tried to keep it even. All right, so during this time, we see the invention of the crossbow. All right, the Chinese are responsible for that. We see the idea of not only taking a census for like population and taxes and all of that, but the Chinese are then able to use it to draft soldiers. Whereas before, typically it's only the warrior class that fought. When it came to agricultural ideas and agricultural practices, the idea of crop rotation. Don't always farm the same thing on the same piece of land. All right, because no matter what you farm, they all suck the nutrients out, and this way, by rotating your crops, not only do you have more crops year-round, but you allow the soil to naturally, regain its fertilization. And of course, the idea of having an animal, in this case, oxen, pull your iron plows. Whereas before it was humans doing most of the work, now you do it with an animal. Human just kind of guides where it goes. And so we see then an increase in food because of that. All right. Today we are going to look at India. Now, remember, and we've looked at different aspects up until this time. The modern, let's say, India, we have the Aryan groups coming in and mixing with the local Indians. Over a period of time, they establish these little kingdoms. Unfortunately, they aren't united, very similar to the Greeks. We do see, they have a common religion and they have a common language, but that's about it. Now, the population of these people, and by now we're calling them Vedic. I could say Indian, but specifically they're Vedic people. We see them expanding into different areas. And we briefly talked about that in the previous chapter. They move into the area around the Ganges River and begin to establish new kingdoms, because remember, they never truly united. Now, up until this time, all of the kingdoms that are set up by these different groups of Vedic people, they're predominantly monarchies. They're ruled over by a king. All right. Now, the Vedic people did not refer to their kings as king. They called them rajas. And so, they're all ruled over by a raja. But in some of these newer kingdoms, so here's where we get the change in ideas, some of the areas begin to establish themselves as oligarchies. Okay, what is an oligarchy? Glad you asked. Okay, it's when a small group of people rule over an area. Now, Mr. Santos, what's a small group? It depended on the kingdom and it depends on the group. Obviously, 2 being the smallest. Okay, it could be a council of 5, a council of 10, a council of 15. All right, but we begin to see that instead of just one person, instead of a king, or in this case a Raja, being the one leading everything, these new Vedic kingdoms begin to form as oligarchies. Now, in most of these that formed oligarchies, not all of them, the council was made up of the warrior class. Okay, it was like the top 3, 5, 20 warriors that made up this ruling council, and they made the decisions for the kingdom. Okay, or in this case, I guess I need to start calling it a state, because it's not really a kingdom because there's no king. All right, so they're the ones making the decision. In others, it could be like a group of wealthy people, it could be a group of landowners, it could be a group of whomever. All right, but in most of them, it's a group of warriors. Okay, now, in the previous chapter, we talked about the 4 social classes. The term is Varna. I don't expect you to remember that. That's not one of the... Or no, wait, I'm lying. Yeah, I'm going to ask you what a Varna is. A Varna is just a social class, okay? One of the 4, all right? And I put them here. You don't need to know their names, okay? This I do promise, all right? But during this time, here's the next new idea that begins to rise up, okay? Oh, okay, sorry. Ganges River, all right? Some of the new kingdoms, all right? And of course, in this case, the Vaj Confederacy, that is actually one of the oligarchies, all right? So it's not ruled over by a Raja, but it's ruled over by a group of people. Now, you don't need to copy this, because this is like literally the 4th time you're seeing this that I just cut and pasted from Google, all right? But this is just to show you, remember, there are 4 social classes, okay? And it all comes from the whole, cutting up of Purusha, all right? And so, what begins to happen now between the years 1000 and 0-ish, okay, we begin to see then some changes in this, okay? Because remember, all right, how do you move from one social class to the other?
You don't.
You die. Move up.
Okay, you die, and then you reincarnate, okay? The real term is transmigration of souls, all right? But you reincarnate in a new body that is now, so like your life, you're a manual laborer, okay? You're no offense, you're a ditch digger, all right? And you're the best ditch digger that ever lived. And then Olivia dies, her body just is whatever, but her soul then reincarnates in a farmer, okay? And so now she has moved up a class, okay? Type of thing, all right? Well, now we begin to see some changes, okay? Change number 1, okay? Within each caste, we begin to see sub-levels, okay? And they're known as jatis, all right? And you do need to know that. So within each varna, within each social class, there are now jatis, okay? So we begin to see an even further split, okay? And all of these then were divided up according to what you actually did within each varna, within each social class, okay? So your profession, okay? And then there were further divisions by what you made, okay? So your product, all right? If you were part of the artisan class, okay? And of course, most of this was also familial, okay? So for example, someone who was a businessman, someone who traded, who bought and sold things, was for some reason considered to be higher within that. I promise I'll come back. All right, within the Vashya, okay, they were considered to be higher than an artisan, someone who worked with metal, or someone who worked with, wood, or someone who worked with whatever, okay? And then within each of those things, there was even further sub-levels, okay? So someone who buys and sells is worth more or is seen as higher than someone who works with metal, someone who's a smith. But amongst the smiths, if we have one that works with gold, and then someone who works with just plain tin, all right, the one who works with gold is seen as having higher status because gold is a more precious metal. It's rarer, it's more valuable than just everyday tin. And now that we don't even use it for bronze, it's whatever, nobody cares. All right, so even with that, okay, you were seen then as having different levels, okay? One of the biggest things, because once again, the only way you can move through Varnas, through the big levels, and through the Jatis, so even the sub-levels, was through death and reincarnation, okay? So intermarriage was forbidden. Okay, so we have a businessman here. Okay, who buys and sells. We have, sorry, Olivia, our metalsmith who works with tin. No, their children cannot marry. Okay, because a higher jati, a lower one. Don't even get started on the whole Varna thing. Like, no, neither one of you is marrying a warrior. Okay, but there isn't even intermarriage between the sub-levels, so that now we have the big four. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, gotta make sure I did that right. But now, amongst those, you have more divisions. You have the jati. Okay, so now when you die and reincarnate, you're not going from the bottom to the next level. You might be going from here to here, okay? Or if you're, I'll get to you, Olive, you're right here, this is a person, just FYI, all right? You die and reincarnate. Yeah, you're not going up, no, you might be going there, or you might be staying here, or if you've been really bad, okay, you might go down a level, okay?
Are you only able to move one sub-level at a time? You can't do like two subs. It's just the one each time.
So now it's a lot harder to go from the Shudra, the unskilled labor, to the priestly ruling class. Okay? So kind of like, okay. So, now you really have to be dedicated to your part in the universe if you hope to make it, okay? And then, of course, the people that are at the highest levels are like, I've been through this for 25 lifetimes, okay? I've earned the right to be arrogant and, pardon my Indian, and asshole to all of you. Because, I've been through all of that, okay? We begin to see then, okay, these changes during this time, okay? Now, population is growing. Here are more changes, all right? Population is growing, all right? And the Vedics, they have basically spread out almost as far as they can go. Like, there's only so much land they can use up. And so, people start creating cities, and those cities are getting bigger, and, they have lots of food because it's very fertile land. And remember, throughout history, more food equals more people, equals more food, equals more people. All right, the cycle continues. And so we begin to see, okay, we begin to see people taking on jobs that don't fit easily into any of these castes or any of these varnas or any of these jatis. For example, teachers, okay? Where do you put them, all right? It's not something that fits easily into those categories, okay? Now, something else that begins to happen, when you have cities, you have a lot of people. When you have a lot of people, no offense, we're pretty dirty, all right? You end up with a lot of garbage. You end up with a lot of waste, okay? And so in this case, who's going to do that, okay? And so what begins to happen, all right, is that instead of, I don't know, fixing the social system or doing whatever, we do see the creation, and I guess I should have done this. Let's move this up. You see the creation of a new class, okay? The Dalits, or I learned when I was in school, they taught us the word pariah. The pariahs, basically the untouchables, okay? In some texts, you will see them called the children of God, because only the gods love them. Nobody else does, okay? These are the lowest of the low. Because they literally deal with garbage their entire life, they are the dirtiest of the dirty, all right? You can spit on them, you can walk on them, you can insult them. That's their role in life, okay? That's how unpure they are. When you learn about like Mother Teresa and the work that she did, she worked with this class. That was the people that she did all of her charity work with, all right? Because nobody else in Indian society would literally touch them or be near them, okay? So yeah, all right, we see then the creation of this lowest of the low class. So, if you're a garbage cleaner, if you're a street sweeper, whatever, your way to being like, hell, it's going to take like 30, 50, 100 lifetimes to make it through this entire system, all right, of death and rebirth, death and rebirth, death and rebirth, death and rebirth, okay? Now, at the very top, okay, you have the priests. And while people lived in small towns or villages, or while people were fairly isolated from each other, nobody questioned the system, all right? But now that you have people congregating in cities, okay, the lower, the street, I mean, hell, the street cleaners, but then also the unskilled laborers and some of the artisans, they begin to see how the priestly class and the warrior class live, and it's like, wait a minute, this is not right. This is not fair, okay? And of course, remember, there's not supposed to be any kind of mixing or interaction between the social classes, but when you're in a city and you're like with it's hard to not interact. Like, I'm sorry, like I know you're like a coppersmith and I'm just a street cleaner, but we kind of have to interact because I'm trying to get over there. So, it's like we do have to, good morning, we do have to mix a little bit, all right? Even if it's just to exchange pleasantries on the street, all right? So obviously, it's kind of like, well, no offense, Olive, sorry, Olivia, but I mean, I know you work as a coppersmith, but you don't seem that much better than me who cleans the garbage. And she's like, you know what, honestly, Santos, I don't see much of a difference either. So, people begin to question the system, and they're like, yeah, I mean, sorry, the priests over there, yeah, they're kind of assholes, but other than that, I mean, it's kind of like, we're just people, okay? And so, the priests are like, okay, yeah, because we're at the top, we you know, we can't lose this position of superiority. So obviously, conspiring with the ruling class, with the kings and the rajas and the oligarchs and whatnot, okay, we begin to see then that that combination, that you know, kind of hand in hand. And I've had students be, you know, way cynical and be like, yeah, religion helps the government, government helps religion. Yeah, you're right. You know, sorry, no offense if you're religious. But in this case, you know, this is where we see some of the beginning of that in India, where the priests, the members of the upper class, go to the Raja and say, okay, Raja, the social system is kind of starting to fall apart because the lower classes are mixing with the middle classes and they're mixing with some of the upper classes. And they're beginning to see that this whole system is all based on fear of an afterlife, and they're starting to question like the whole thing. So, king or Raja, this is what we're going to do, okay? And so once again, the priestly class, hey, the gods have chosen this Raja, and guess what the Raja says? The Raja says, listen to the priests, all right? Listen, you know, don't Olivia, do not talk to the garbage members, all right? I know you're friendly, all right, but don't. And Kayla, no, stop talking to the farmers, all right? I know, you know, you like to wave to people, but no, all right? Because remember, that's what the king says, and the king is chosen by the gods, and the king told me to tell you, okay? So it comes from Manu and Purusha and Shiva and all of those other gods, okay? But obviously, you know, humans are humans, and the more you tell someone not to do something, yeah, we're going to do that. Okay, so in this case, then we begin to see, then people begin to challenge those ideas. Okay, there has to be more to existence than living, dying, reincarnating, living, dying, reincarnating, living, dying, reincarnating, living, dying, reincarnating. Okay, there has to be more to it. Okay, now, okay, there we go. So, the first philosophy that we're going to look at, okay, that questions the traditional beliefs is one known as Jainism. Okay, Jainism was started by a man named Vardhamana. I'm going to butcher it, Mahavira. Usually I can do just Mahavira. Okay, so I'm just going to say Mahavira. I'm going to skip his first name. All right? It started by Mahavira. Okay? Now, he is one of these city dwellers who basically sees that some people are suffering, some people are okay, and then some people are living in this luxury. So basically, all of the things that the priests were like, no, we don't want you to see that. We don't want you to see, you know, how all of this is. So, what he does is, at 30 years old, he leaves his home, okay? Number one, he gives up everything. He actually comes from a fairly wealthy family. He gives up everything, all right? Just gets rid of everything, shaves his head, wears raggedy clothes, all right? This is known as asceticism, okay? And basically, he just wanders around trying to figure out the meaning of life. Because he's like, that can't be all that we're here for. Born, die, reincarnate. Born, die, reincarnate. And I know I didn't do it here, but the reason why it's a pyramid, are there a lot of upper class? No. Are there a lot of lower class? Yes. All right? And so for the majority of people, life sucks. And you have to be born, die, and reincarnate over and over and over again into, once again, pardon my language, a shitty life for like 20 lifetimes. All right? That can't be it. All right? That cannot be our purpose. Okay? And so, one of the things that Jainism, you know, one of the things that Mahavira comes up with, number one, all right, you need to purify your soul, all right? And the only way to do that is to give up everything you own, all right? Poverty will purify you, okay? And if you think that's crazy, there's a lot of religious groups that actually feel that, you know, if you give up everything, give up all your possessions, you know, it's a step closer to being, you know, godlike. One of the things, of course, that he comes up with is the concept known as ahimsa, okay, which is harm no living creature, okay? Now, this is not the beginning of like vegetarianism in Indian culture, but it's one of the things that leads to it, okay? All life is precious, okay? Of course, he was looking at human life, all right, you know, so from the street cleaner, who's the lowest of the low, to the priestly class that is the highest of the high. But it eventually expands to all life. And so many people who subscribe to some of these beliefs, it's like you don't even step on a spider, all right? Like, I know they freak you out, and I know people are scared, and some people's first reaction is to grab a shoe and just smack it. And there you go, spider problem gone, all right? But some people are like, let's go to the window, Nehemia, open the window. Go, spider, go with your spider friends and your spider family, you know, type of thing. And so that's the belief, all right? So ahimsa. Now, if you're able to purify your soul, giving up everything you own and not harming any single living creature, you will eventually attain this state of permanent bliss. You will break the cycle, okay, and become one with the universe. All right? So that, you know, maybe in 2 lifetimes, Juliana purified her soul, and now she's one with the universe in a state of eternal bliss. Whereas, sorry, Jose, he's still, you know, living, dying, reincarnate, you know, for like 30 lifetimes until he finally learns his lesson. Okay? But if you're able to do this, okay, you know, yeah. Otherwise, you will continue to do this whole cycle until you can purify yourself. Right? So that's Jainism. Believe it or not, it's not very popular. Okay? Only a few people actually follow it. Why would this not be popular? What's the main thing you have to do? Give up everything. Even if you're a member of one of the lower classes, it's like, I already don't have that much, and now I'm supposed to give that up too? And of course, for the upper classes, it's like, I'm not giving up my stuff. My life's pretty good. You know, I don't need to escape, you know, the cycle. I'm living a really good life as it is. Okay? And so, along comes another philosopher, a man named Siddhartha Gautama. Okay? His name is Siddhartha, but eventually he becomes known as the Buddha. Okay? Now, just FYI, okay, Buddha is just a word that means the enlightened one. Okay? It's not like a title, it's not like a god name, or whatever. Alright? Now, who was Siddhartha? He actually came from the warrior class. So, the second level up here. Okay? And his family was actually very influential. Alright? The kingdom that Siddhartha was born into, I shouldn't say kingdom, because it wasn't. It was one of those oligarchies. His family was part of the ruling class. They were part of that council. Alright? And so he actually lived a really, really good life. He was born into all kinds of wealth. He was also very sheltered. All right, up until around the age of 16, 17, he never left the family compound. All right, so to him, this is how everybody lived. You had servants, you had gardens, you had food whenever you wanted it, you had an awesome room, you had like the latest PS7, no, which one are we at? I don't know. But thank you, 5. You know, you had the latest. Well, you were so rich, you got the 7 before anyone else did. All right, you know, that was Siddhartha's life. One day, for whatever reason, he leaves the family compound. And he is floored to realize that not every person in India lives the way he does. Okay? He sees poverty. He sees disease. He sees especially the untouchables basically like cleaning the streets and being kicked on and spit on by like other people. Like he literally sees this and he's like, you mean everything I've known my entire life is a lie? Because he thought everybody lived like him. And it turns out that they don't. Okay? And so he begins to question all of this, just like, so how is that fair that, but Siddhartha, it's because you've already lived like 30 lifetimes. And he's like, I don't remember. So just because I'm born to an important family means that I've lived, 30, 40, 80 lifetimes and have somehow worked my way. He's like, that makes no sense, type of thing. All right. So he's 29 years old, and he does something similar to what Mahavira does, in that he gives up everything. All right. He gets rid of all his stuff, and he begins to wander around India, trying to figure out the meaning of life. Okay. Because once again, he says there has to be more than just living, dying, reincarnating. Because for 95% of the people, life sucks. Life is miserable. Life is horrible. All right? What purpose does it serve to constantly be born and die and be born again if you're just going from one miserable life to another? All right? If you were at least going from street cleaner to ruler, all right, that might make sense. All right, but for the most part, you're just going from shitty life to shitty life to shitty life, for an eternity. Okay? So, there has to be more. There has to be a purpose to it. He wanders India for 6 years. Okay? Talking to people, staying places, trying, like I said, to figure out the meaning of life. Okay? After 6 years, he finds himself on the edges of the Ganges River. He's literally, according to legend, he's just sitting there. He's actually under a tree. And he's just kind of contemplating all of his travels and all of the people that he's met and all of the things and skipping rocks or whatever. And it comes to him. All right, he is enlightened. Okay? Now, he calls it nirvana. He actually gives it a name. All right? And if you're old enough, or if you're old like Mr. Santos, it's not a band, okay? Although that's where the band got its name. All right? But he calls it nirvana, this state of eternal bliss where you become one with the universe. Okay? You don't have to give up everything. All right? But you also can't be, once again, pardon my language, a greedy bastard like the upper class people that are just hoarding everything. There has to be something in the middle where you can purify your soul and somehow achieve nirvana. Okay? And so, he comes up with this thing. This is what he comes up with, just thinking at the edge of the Ganges River. Number one, you have to accept the fact that life is full of suffering. Life sucks. Life is miserable. Okay? The quicker you acknowledge that, now we can take the next step. All right? Whoever told you life was going to be easy was lying to you, because it's not. All right? Number two, the reason why you suffer is because you have desires. Okay? I am jealously looking at Olivia's iced coffee from Dunkin' Donuts. Okay? And yes, right now I'm just like, I would give anything to have an iced coffee from Dunkin' Donuts. I mean, I have green tea right now, but the coffee looks a lot better. Okay? Or, I'm looking at Josie Stanley, sorry, no offense, and I'm like, I just have this stupid thermos thing for my water, but oh my God, that one is so much cool. I mean, it's not the pink one, but I think it's okay. I would love to have that Stanley instead of this. Okay? So, when you have desires, you're miserable because I don't have the coffee and I don't have the Stanley. All right? So yeah, I'm pretty pissed. Okay? Well, if you want to avoid this, then you need to eliminate desire from your life. You need to somehow learn, okay, to not, want that, okay, just because Olivia has it, or not want the Stanley because Josie has it, okay, type of thing. You need to somehow purify your soul so that you're not jealous of the things that people have that you don't. Now, in order to do that, obviously it's not easy, all right? And when I took this class, 35 years ago, they actually made us memorize what's called the Eightfold Path. I'm not going to make you do that. If you really want to, you can look it up. But, and this is like the hard part. You have to have right thoughts. You have to have right profession. Like you have to find the job that works for you. You have to have certain mental discipline. You have to, whether you call it prayer or meditation or, whatever, you have to do that every day. So there's like 8 different things that you have to do. And it doesn't just have, I prayed, I meditated, I thought good things. Where the fuck's my standard? No. This is a lifetime, all right, where you're constantly striving to better yourself, to gain wisdom, okay, where you're meditating every day, to gain that purity, where, you engage in ethical behavior. And I know I sometimes I can be a pain in the ass, so I'm gonna try every day to be a better person so it's not like you just did it overnight and now I'm in nirvana. And so Buddha was basically like, this takes a lifetime, sometimes 2 or 3 lifetimes, okay, to be able to achieve it. But once you make that commitment to purify your soul, I should write it, you escape this cycle of death and rebirth, and you enter nirvana. Okay? And of course, you could be the lowest garbage cleaner, you could be a goldsmith, you could be a warrior, hell, you could even be a priest. All right? But once you purify your soul, then yes, okay, you take that exit into nirvana. And this becomes very, very attractive to people because, okay, I just have to work at being a better person every day by, doing, right words, right thought, right job, right discipline, and you don't have to give up your stuff, okay? That's not a part of it, all right? You can keep all your shit as long as every day you're trying to be better. Buddhism attracts all kinds of followers, okay? People who are trying then their best to just be better people, all right? So that someday they can escape this cycle of suffering and be a part of the universe and enjoy eternal bliss, okay? So that is India and Buddhism, all right? Questions or comments? Because now we're going to shift gears completely and look at the Greeks, okay? Let me erase this because I am going to need the space. The Greeks, as you know, okay, were individual cities, and they all had, okay, their own different culture, their own different ideas, okay? There were over 150 of them, all right? They each had basically a different lifestyle. And this is from the last chapter and similar to what we see in India. What were the only 2 things that all of these Greek cities had in common? Language. They all spoke Greek. And religion. Okay? They all worshiped the same pantheon of gods. Okay? Now, FYI, you do need to know another P word, and that is polis. Okay? Polis is the Greek word for city. Okay, and I put that there just because Santos is a word nerd. Certain English words like metropolis and politics, we get from the Greek polis. All right. Other than where Superman lives, what is a metropolis? Yeah, a big city. Not just not Utica, but New York City. All right. So yeah, we're a city, we're a polis, but New York is a metropolis. Okay. And then of course the word politics, the act of governing, because you needed to govern the city. Okay. Now, each of the cities were independent, but they all had different forms of government, or politics. Okay. So that's where we get the term. All right. Now, some of the more popular ones, or some of the more common ones, I didn't write it up there, and I should have, but obviously some of them were a monarchy. Okay. A monarchy is where you have a king, all right, in some cases a queen, but you have a king, and that's who does everything. Okay. It's a little bit different from a tyranny, and these were some of the Greek city-states. A tyranny, you are being ruled by just one person, but it's like the most popular person, and they somehow came to power either through a revolution or because everybody loved them or whatever. But unlike a king, though, when the tyrant dies, the government doesn't automatically go to the oldest son. All right, so it's a little bit different. Okay, we already talked about this one a little bit because some of the Indian kingdoms practiced it, an oligarchy, where you have it's ruled by a group. The group could be 2 people, it could be 5, it could be 10, all right? But the council decides. And then finally, the Greeks came up with this system, and it was unique because nobody else had done it, a democracy, okay? Where you rule by vote, okay? Everyone. Sorry, ladies, not the women, I should correct myself. Every man over a certain age and meeting certain qualifications got a vote. And it was a simple majority. If that's what all the men voted for, then that's what the city did. Okay? Now, in these cities, okay, it was just like a mini micro version of what we saw in the different kingdoms, or even in the empires, because you had different classes, you had different people, you had, priests, you had slaves, you had, all of that, all right, but just on a city level, okay? Now, because you do have such a small level, the household, the family, okay, was considered to be the most important unit you could belong to. And because we're only dealing on a citywide thing, the city government was basically just seen as a bigger extension. Our city here is just one big thing, okay? Except that, we've got, actual blood relatives here, and then blood relatives, and then, but altogether, we're that giant family. This was basically how most of them operated. The only exception was Sparta, and I'll explain why in a minute. Okay, now, like I said, there were over 150 of these. Okay, and unless you take a specific Greek history class, okay, we don't really look at all of them. We only look at 2. Okay, we look at Athens, and we look at Sparta. All right? Now, where are you? Here's Sparta, okay? Athens is right here. So they were in different parts of Greece. And then, of course, you have other cities like Thebes and Marathon and Corinth. The Greeks spread out onto some of the different islands that were in the Aegean, okay? Remember, they spread out into what is modern day Turkey, and that area became known as Ionia. But so you had Ionian Greeks, you had mainland Greeks, and you had Greeks that lived on the islands. Okay, just a couple of things. There was this is not like people like to laugh afterwards. There was an island called Lesbos. Okay. Rhode Island is named after the island of Rhodes, okay, and stuff like that. All right, now, okay, why do we only look at Athens and Sparta? Okay, because they were the ones that were complete and total opposites of each other. Okay, Sparta was an oligarchy. Okay, now. They had two kings. One was the king of the city, and the other one was the king for war. And even though they called them kings, okay, it was an oligarchy because the two of them had to come to agreement when it came to decisions for the city. Okay, Spartan life was rigid and organized. Okay, Spartan society was a military society. All right. The term Spartan is sometimes used as an adjective. Okay. This room could be described as Spartan. Okay. Because it has the basic necessities for me to teach you. There's a computer, there's a board, there's a projector, there's places for you to sit. That's it, okay? Sometimes people ask me, Mr. Santos, like, why don't you decorate your room? Like, in high school, my teacher had like maps and pictures and cardboard, and why don't I decorate?
Because you share it with me.
Yeah, this isn't my room. This isn't my room. Come to my office. That's where I decorate. That's where, like, my whole personality just, explodes. All right? And so because we share, the only thing we need, a place for students to sit, a place for me to write shit, so you can take notes, and of course, because I do have PowerPoints, a place where I can show those. All right? Yeah, bless you. Other than that, like, I don't need anything else. So this room is very Spartan, okay? Only the bare minimum. And that's how the Spartans lived their lives. That's how their society was. The bare minimum, okay? So, everything else was geared to war, all right? Gentlemen, at 7 years old, you were taken from your families and sent to a military academy. It was called the Agagi. You don't need to know that, but if you want to study history later, all right, where you were basically raised as soldiers. You were put through all kinds of rigorous physical and mental training. Basically, your exams were like they drop you off in the forest and naked and tell you to come back. You had to use your wits. You had to use what you learned, to survive, to stay warm. Because obviously, if you can't even survive like a 10-mile trip back to camp, then what kind of soldier are you going to be? Yeah, you deserve to die, or you deserve to lose a limb, or get eaten by a wolf, or whatever. Okay? Now, at age 20, you then entered the actual army. Okay? So you had basically, I'm trying to do math here, 13, 14 years of training. Your final exam, you had to be able to kill a slave without being caught. If you could do that, then that was like, the end of basic training. Now you were officially a soldier. Okay? At 20 years old, you entered the army. You were also expected to get married, all right? But you lived in the barracks for 10 years. The only time you were allowed to go home to see your wife was to have sex, to make a baby. That was it. Okay? The rest of the time, you were with the army. Okay? And it was a rough life. It was tough. Like I said, you got the bare minimum. That was it. All right? Now, after 30, you were allowed to then go home, live with your wife, and by now, hopefully you had like 2 or 3 kids. And of course, you went on to do your profession, whatever you were going to do, but you could be called up to go to war up until you were 60. So throughout your lifetime, you still engaged in training and, physical stuff. And, I mean, just because you're 50 doesn't mean you're allowed to be weak. You still have to be able to fight. All right? Now, Spartan women, on the other hand, they enjoyed all kinds of freedom, as I said, because, for example, ladies, you got married at 20, but other than what they call conjugal visits, other than visits for sex, your husband was never around. He was in the army. So who took care of the house? Who took care of the farm? Who took care of all the lands? The women, yes. Okay? And even after your husband came home to live with you, if he got called off to war, and remember when the Greeks fought the Persians, that was a 25-year war, okay? So who's going to take care of everything while hubby is at war? The women, okay? So Spartan women actually ran businesses and ran farms, and whereas in other cultures, no, you can't go outside because, men, and, you got to keep, cover. Spartan women didn't give a fuck, because where were all the men? They were off at war. They were fighting. So there's no one there going to be like, hey, baby, yeah, nice go. No, none of that. So they didn't have to. And even if they did, Spartan women were also taught to be tough, because Spartans, once again, very military mentality. Should the worst ever happen, where all of the Spartan men are killed in battle, guess who it's going to be up to defend the city? So they even got military training, even though they were only going to use it in that extreme emergency. So Spartan women, at least, could, handle themselves. All right, even when it came to that. All right. Now, the other Greek cities, though, were different. Okay, but unfortunately, we are out of time. All right. So when we come back from break, I'll probably